Story 1, I was 15 and walking across a railroad bridge over a creek when I heard the train coming from around the curve. The bridge was not wide enough to stand to the side. I ran back the way I came, as fast as I could, with the train coming from behind. The railroad ties were the perfect length for my stride. As I got near the embankment, the ties suddenly became further apart and I tripped, banging my shin, and I couldn't get back up. I crawled the last 30 feet on my hands and knees, rolling off the track at the earliest point possible. A solid 90 seconds later, the train came by. I had lots more time than I feared, but I was terrified during the run. Story 2. My uncle and I were swimming around a bunch of rocks at the edge of a beach one time, and it was super choppy. Big mistake, because it got to the point where we wanted out, and we couldn't swim the way we came because the tide was ripping way too much our way. So we tried to get up on the rocks. My uncle got stuck in some fishing line that was left there, and I was a bit further down. Got dumped right into a deep rock pool, high sides, and I couldn't get out of it. After spending what felt like 5 minutes, but it probably wasn't, getting pushed underwater when trying to scramble onto the rocks, not reaching anything worth grabbing onto, and getting cut from them because of the heavy waves, I just resorted to screaming, and thinking I was probably genuinely going to drown, I didn't know what to do. Then some random guy who happened to be in the area spearfishing came up and dragged me out. Story 2. My uncle and I were swimming around a bunch of rocks at the edge of a beach one time, and it was super choppy. Big mistake, because it got to the point where we wanted out, and we couldn't swim the way we came because the tide was ripping way too much our way. So we tried to get up on the rocks. My uncle got stuck in some fishing line that was left there, and I was a bit further down. Got dumped right into a deep rock pool, high sides, and I couldn't get out of it. After spending what felt like 5 minutes, but it probably wasn't, getting pushed underwater when trying to scramble onto the rocks, not reaching anything worth grabbing onto, and getting cut from them because of the heavy waves, I just resorted to screaming, and thinking I was probably genuinely going to drown, I didn't know what to do. Then some random guy who happened to be in the area spearfishing came up and dragged me out. Story 4. Getting prepped for a neurosurgery that could wreck me in itself. I was getting an IV of antibiotics and waiting on the anesthesiologist to put me under. My whole family was there, we were talking, and trying to comfort my wife who was having a hard time with it. She's holding my hand crying, Mom and Dad trying to hold it together behind her. She looks up at me and I see her go ghost white. First I thought she was going to faint. At the same point I noticed my dad run out of the room rather quickly, and that's when it started. Super cold but start pouring sweat, followed by breathing problems. My throat is swelling shut, hives everywhere, all in a matter of 45 seconds. In rushes at least 5 nurses and 3 doctors plus anesthesiologist. Doc tells me I'm allergic to the IV, so they have to put me out now. I didn't even get to tell her I loved her. I was trying to say the words but couldn't, and as the darkness crept in, it was the first time the fear of death set in. Story 5. I was struck by lightning. It blew me off my feet, paralyzed me, and knocked me unconscious. While I was unconscious, I was semi-aware. Not in an awake and talking way, more of a lucid dreaming type of way. Peaceful and calm. All I could see was blackness and falling stars, kind of like the green scrolling numbers on the Matrix. Before I came to, I honestly thought that was what death was. Story 6. When I was a child, I wanted to bungee jump, and I had a play set in my backyard with a climbing rope. Once on the second story of the play set, I got the rope that led to the ground, but I couldn't get it properly tied around my waist, so I tied it around my neck and jumped off. Luckily, somehow I didn't snap my neck, but then I was left hanging there. My feet couldn't reach the ground. I remember trying to stretch my toes to reach and clawing, trying to use my hands to get some room to breathe, but I couldn't. I realized I was going to die. Luckily, I had a friend over who ran inside to get my mom, and she was able to get me down, which I don't really remember. I do remember the rope burn I had around my neck for days, though. Edit. I'm a girl. Doesn't really matter. People just keep calling me man. And I was 5. Story 7. Began choking on some gummy worms at a friend's party. Everyone thought I was joking, and I was hopelessly trying to cough it out for a good minute or two before my friend Karate chopped me on the back when he realized I was actually choking. I was scared shitless at the time, thought I was done for. Story 8. Yeah, I gave an 11-year-old-ish boy the Heimlich maneuver when I could see that he was choking on his food while I was out for a bite at a Chinese restaurant a couple of months ago. His parents were short-circuiting in fear. After the 4th squeeze, out popped a half a prawn and a long stream of saliva. The place was eerily silent after that. It's freaky no matter what end of it you're on. Edit, Ripey and Box. Everyone was silent and sort of mortified. No round of applause or anything like that. Little more detail, I just finished a run, and the restaurant seated me next to a family. Mother, father, son. No biggie, I am somewhat of a regular at the restaurant. I didn't go over until I saw the boy smacking his chest and his mother trying to slap his back. I ran over, looked at Dad, who was squirming at this point, and said, "He needs a Heimlich." He yells, "Yes, give him the Heimlich." So that's permission, which I later figured out is required. Had to run behind the boy and give him the Heimlich. Thank God it worked. Kevin Spacey comments, "Really, people? Weak?" Mother says, "Wow, wow, wow," about 3 to 4 times while I am doing this. Father is frozen, sort of similar to that poster's grade school teacher. I hope the son forgives his father. He was just scared shitless, not indifferent. Afterward, I said, "Are you all right now?" Boy nodded and started talking. His mother said, "You're able to talk now," looked at me and said, "Thank you," and sat back down. Boy gets up to go to bathroom to wash himself off. Everyone in the restaurant is staring at me, like I'd walked off a spaceship or something. Very quiet, lots of low voices, sort of pseudo-conversations while looking at me. I'm a little nervous at this point. Boy comes back to table. I realize I have his saliva all over me, so I go to bathroom and clean up. See a piece of food on my neck that somehow came out of his mucus saliva prawn plug. Gross. I come back to my table and sort of pick at my food. Now, I was hungry after the 10-mile run, so I'd basically lost my appetite. Waiter comes over and says, "They would like to buy you a beer." It's a weeknight, and I'm not in the mood for a beer. Weekend warrior here, so I opt for a lemonade. Family and I make small talk. Boy is at a small school and runs cross-country for their team. He was apparently very embarrassed. Mother said that when Boy went to wash up. I understand, etc. So I eat about 3 to 4 bites of food, realize it tastes like pennies instead of food, adrenaline, I guess, and I ask for to-go boxes, and I leave. Went back to restaurant 2 weeks later. Manager comes up to me, thanks me, but they never comped me any meals or anything like that. No worries, they are not a high-end business, and I expect they are just trying to get by. But their staff knows who I am when I walk in. I've saved lives a few times, not really trained in anything. I bailed my mom out of a yellow jacket's nest and got stung 150 times. Nearly killed me. I went over to her place, cooked her a B-day dinner, crab enchiladas, and she went up her 35-meter hill to go pick a lemon. Heard her screaming and ran outside, saw her flailing. She yelled, "Bees!" and wasn't running away from them. I saw a volcano of yellow jackets erupting from the ground, and I knew I was about to get fucked royally. Never hesitated for a minute, though. That was my mother. Sprinted up the rather steep stairs, got behind her, whipped off my shirt to swat at bees on her, grabbed her arms and guided her swatted wasps off of her. They dialed in on my back and ribs as I was behind her, shooing them away. I threw her in the shower and turned on the water and went after the ones who'd come into her house as I slammed door shut with a can of Lysol and a lighter. These fuckers were going to die a painful death. I was in a lot of pain, so I was pissed. We could not eat our dinner and sat there in shock. Did not really connect dots that it might be a good idea to go get checked out. Drove us to hospital. We both miraculously survived a pretty horrible event. She's older, so I am glad I got the brunt of the stings, bites. Kicked my ass for a year or more. I joke with my mom, since she had a difficult childbirth with me, that I think that makes us kinda even now. At any rate, take a CPR class. They're available through most cities and universities. Good to have that one handy. I've saved a few others, but I don't want to post a lot of narcissistic stuff. I'm sure 98% of you would do the same thing if confronted with that reality. Story 9. I was the passenger in a car when the driver started having a seizure. His foot was on the gas pedal and the car was going faster and faster, and we were flying through a downtown area. It's a miracle we didn't hit any people or buildings. Somehow I realized after about 5 blocks to push the gear shift into neutral, auto transmission, shifter in the middle, and was then able to steer the car into a pile of snow. Driver was still seizing when the car stopped. Our daughter was in the back seat. I called 911 but gave the dispatcher the wrong cross streets in my panic. The ambulance came to 2 blocks away, but I could hear it. Fortunately, the dispatcher had kept me on the phone. And that's the day we found out my husband had the brain tumor that was eventually, 28 days later, fatal. Edit, thank you all so much for your kind thoughts. I was trying to answer you all one by one, but thought this would be better. It's been almost 5 years. Some days are good, some are not. And it still has an almost daily impact, as you can imagine, because I'm the parent of a child who lost her father. We have gone to grief counseling, and we will again as needed. My husband had never had a seizure prior to this that we know of. The shifter was in the middle as opposed to on the column. I called him the driver because that was the context of why I thought I was going to die. I think that's all of the questions I was asked. Thank you again for your kind thoughts. Story 10. Fell 3 stories due to freezing rain on the roof that night, and on the way down I was certain I was going to die. I went out there to talk on the phone since my bedroom was above my parents'. I fell at about a 45-degree angle onto my feet. The impact caused my T9 vertebrae to fracture, and once I fell from that angle to flat, my right lung collapsed, and I had a brain bleed on the front and back of my brain. Luckily, my father had heard me scream and found me within a couple minutes, coughing up blood into the grass. He then drove me to the hospital and nearly passed out a few times on the way there, figuring that it was already too late for me. Spent the whole ride trying to calm him down as I felt the pressure increase in my chest from the amount of blood filling my chest due to the collapsed lung. When I arrived at the hospital, I blacked out as nurses and my parents and family doctor were around me looking worried sick. Story 11. I grew up in rural Russia, nasty little town, used to have gold down there, now it's drained and town has gone to shit. Elderly live on pension, youth, having not much else to do, drinks until they go crazy. Anyway, in 2008 I came there to visit parents for a week. On a third day I met a guy I used to go to school with. He invited me at his home to get drunk with his friends. I accepted. Not much to do around there, as I mentioned. I got to his place and he was there with two mean-looking motherfuckers. Prison tattoos, specific thug jargon, wearing leather jackets indoors. Lovely bunch. As we get progressively more drunk, one of them mentions that he has some primo weed at his place. So we all get in a car to drive to his place. I sit in the back with him. He smokes in a car, throwing ashes in an empty jewelry box that worked as an ashtray in that car, apparently. I smoke a cig too. He offers me this box and I flick the ash into it. Suddenly he yells, "Am I your slave, bitch?" Ian punches me in the face. Hard. I get disoriented, trying to stop the nose bleeding, while some sort of scuffle ensues in the car. Later, they told me how I fucked up. I should have taken the box from his hands and hold my own ashtray, while I just flicked my ash while he was holding it, making him my bitch or whatever. Next thing I know, they drag me out in the snow. It was January, and one of them yells at me, "Open the trunk!" So, I'm completely fucking baffled by the whole thing. I look at my friend. He gives me that look, like, you better do what you're asked or else. I go to the trunk, open it, and there's a Saiga shotgun laying there. "Take it and give it to me," he said. I immediately tried to make a run for it, but they caught me, pushed me to the ground. They put me on my knees. One of them grabs a shotgun, cocks it, and aims it at my head. I'm thinking I don't want to die, but I stay silent and frozen. He keeps the gun to my head. And then he falls to the ground laughing his ass off. And they all do the same. After a couple of minutes of crazy laughter, they stood me up, cleaned me up from all the snow, patting me on the back saying, "We got you! We got you! You should have seen your face! Ha 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 ha!" Then we all get back to the car and drive to the guy who had the weed. We stayed up all night drinking and smoking weed. Once they all passed out, I snuck out and went home. I stayed at home for all the remaining 4 days and took the flight back to Moscow. Last year I learned that my friend went to prison for racket and drug trafficking. I never visited since and I don't think I will. Parents now visit me instead. They like to cuddle with their grandchildren and I like to not get my head blown off by some redneck alcoholics. The end. Hey, thanks for watching. Don't forget to like and subscribe and make sure to check out the video on screen. We have a whole playlist of videos just like these, so what are you waiting for? See you in the next one.